Imagine this. The year is 1963, and the setting is one of the biggest stages in Germany, the Liederhalle, a world-renowned concert hall in a city called Stuttgart. On stage is a jazz band, but it isn't just any jazz band. Miles Davis, one of the most influential and famous jazz musicians of the time, had brought his quintet to Europe at the peak of his fame. And the people sitting in the crowd that night weren't just casual listeners. These were other musicians, business people, politicians. This was the kind of audience that could make or break a reputation. And sitting on stage behind the piano was a 23-year-old Herbie Hancock. Today, Herbie is widely regarded as one of the greatest jazz pianists to ever touch the keys. But in 1963, that just wasn't yet the case. He was by far the youngest in Miles Davis's quintet and had the most to prove. From his perspective, he needed to nail this performance. Herbie needed perfection. As if that pressure wasn't enough, Miles and Herbie's relationship was already strained. You see, Herbie had this habit of meticulously recording each and every one of his performances. So before any shows, he would take his tape recorder on stage, crawl under the piano, and set his microphones up. Now the problem is, usually at around this time he would be setting up under the piano, Miles would be counting in the tempo for the first song. But Herbie would still be under that piano. This is the exact predicament Herbie found himself in that night at Stuttgart, when he was supposed to come in on his huge first piano entrance of the night. Nothing happened. It's hard to play a piano from underneath it. So Miles, who was visibly annoyed, turned around, looked directly at Herbie, groaned, and they had to restart their very first tune of the night before the show was finally able to kick off. Now, sometime during the show, the quintet began playing So What?, Miles' composition that had taken the world by storm and played a massive role in revolutionizing jazz. It was that song the audience had come to hear, and it goes something like this. Now, by this point in the night, it was hot. The room was packed, and the band was deep in the music. Miles was burning on the trumpet, and Herbie was right there with him on the piano. The sound was powerful, it was innovative, and the crowd was completely locked in. The show was everything you'd want it to be. But then, right in the middle of one of Miles' incredible trumpet solos, Herbie played the wrong chord. That chord wasn't just slightly wrong. It was completely and utterly disastrous. In fact, it sounded so bad that Herbie later said he covered his ears, braced himself, and couldn't even touch the piano for the next minute. He waited for Miles to turn around, to glare at him, maybe even to stop the performance entirely. But Miles simply paused for a moment, listened, and proceeded to play a series of notes that made Herbie's wrong chord sound right. Suddenly, after that playing, the chord didn't sound wrong anymore. It sounded intentional. The music kept moving, the band kept playing, and the audience heard not a mistake, but something that sounded completely natural, even good. Here's the thing. If Miles had expected perfection out of his quintet that night, that performance would have been over the moment Herbie played his wrong chord. And so what jazz taught me, what two of the most incredible jazz musicians to ever live taught me, is the difference between chasing perfection and pursuing mastery. So what is that difference? Well, on stage, Miles and Herbie weren't just two different musicians. They had two entirely different mindsets. Herbie's situation reflects a feeling most of us know very well, and that is the pressure to get everything right. Because when something truly matters to you, whether it be a race, a performance, a presentation, you don't just want it to go well, you want it to be perfect. On paper, this mindset makes complete sense, but here's the problem. When something really matters to you, Things will always find a way to go wrong. Maybe the pressure gets to you during a super important English presentation and you blank. Or you stutter on your line during a play, or your voice cracks during a grad speech to your entire graduating class. That is a true story, by the way. In Herbie's case, it was a slip of his fingers during one of the most important performances of his life. Perfection is fragile, and if your entire mindset is built on that perfection, the moment something goes wrong, everything begins to fall apart. Now, Miles, on the other hand, understood something that most of us don't, and that was that while life does not follow a script, it does have structure. As jazz musicians, we often take improvised solos, and in preparation for these solos, we don't just memorize every note we're going to play. We instead prepare by studying the structure of the song through something called chord changes. By studying these chord changes, we can understand what patterns to look for, and therefore what musical options we have. So we don't prepare in the conventional sense of just memorization, but instead through deep understanding. In this way of deep understanding, we're not thrown off when something goes wrong, because we can always figure out where to go next. That's what Miles did. He didn't ignore Herbie's mistake. He certainly didn't panic. He understood the context well enough to turn it into something that worked. That's what it means to pursue mastery over perfection. Perfection is one-dimensional. The moment something goes wrong, everything collapses. But mastery, it gives you the tools to adapt, to recover, and to create something even better than what you originally planned for. So whether it's a performance, a presentation, a grad speech, or any challenge in life, in the words of Miles Davis, when you play a wrong note, it's the next one you play that determines if it was good or bad. So don't fear mistakes. Master your craft well enough to turn them into music. Thank you for listening.